Hi, I'm Norman Liss. The name of the program is The Way to Go. I invite you to join me as we explore places to go and things to do. Taking a trip to reality today because my guest is, believe it or not, the real Kramer. The real Kramer. Kenny Kramer, on whom the Seinfeld show based the character of Kramer. He's real. He lives in New York. He does some crazy things and some wonderful things. And Kenny Kramer is here today. Came all the way up from Midtown New York.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty
made
exciting.
the trip up here.
That's true.
Now, without the mustache and the long hair, Michael Richard, who plays you on the Seinfeld show, looks like you. He's tall, the features are the same. How come you're not playing yourself?
I know. I tell you. Well, when Larry David, who's the show's executive producer and co-creator, was basing a character on me, he came across. We lived across the hall from each other, just like they do on Seinfeld. And he's the real George Costanza, incidentally.
He looks like him too.
He looks like him, and George Costanza is based on Larry David, and Larry's been a buddy of mine 20 years. And one day he and Jerry got together to write this show, and he came over. He said, "Hey, Kramer, I want to base a character on you for this show I'm writing, and I want to call him Kramer. Is that okay?" And I said, "Certainly it is, as long as I get to play Kramer."
Uh-huh.
And he said, "You can't be Kramer." And I said, "But I am Kramer," And if that sounds familiar, that was a scene that took place in an episode called The Pilot, where Kramer wanted to play Kramer for the show within the show.
So much of what's on the show is really based on what really has happened in Larry David's life, isn't it?
Well, yeah, Larry's life and the life of the writers and the writing staff, they all write about their experiences, but, the show.
You can answer a question for me. Who is playing Seinfeld?
That's the one that we all haven't figured out yet, because the Jerry Seinfeld I know is a much nicer guy than the Jerry Seinfeld we see on television.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the Jerry Seinfeld we see on television will beat up an old lady for a rye bread without thinking about it. The real Jerry would never do such a thing. The thing about Seinfeld that people don't really realize is, everybody looks at it as this comedy, but Larry's thing is very dark. Seinfeld is a very dark show, and if we look at who these people are, George, Elaine, Jerry, Kramer, we love these people. Who are they? These are probably the most selfish, dysfunctional, self-centered, despicable human beings. Nobody will have them as friends. That's why they're with each other. What do they? They mug old ladies. They burn down cabins. They break up couples. And
since you are the basis for one of these despicable people, we're saying a lot about you, aren't we?
Well, I like to think that Kramer is the guy who does come up with the most morality. If you really think about it, Kramer has been seen as a very moral person. He saved the pinky toe. He's done heroic deeds in his time. Of course, lately, I've been a little ashamed of Kramer, like when he got mugged for an armoire by those two sissy boys.
Do you have...
Not that there's anything wrong with it.
You have no say or no input to the show at all?
None whatsoever. Just by virtue of the fact that Larry's my friend and he's got a mind that's a vault. He retains things and sees things that most people don't see, and he finds these little foibles, these little things in the human personality that are out of whack.
What's his background?
He's a very neurotic, messed up. He's a mad comedy genius.
He's George.
He is George. Look at the poor guy. A guy who's had to beg for dates, for food, for
Is Elaine based upon someone in his experience?
Absolutely. Elaine is based on a girl named Monica, who was a platonic ex-girlfriend of his, whose father was a great author. Monica's father, Richard Yates, wrote the book Easter Parade. In fact, Larry was always in awe of Monica's father, the great author, and he arranged to have dinner. She wanted to meet Richard Yates, and they met at the Algonquin Hotel. He was visiting New York. In preparation for that, Larry bought this new suede jacket for the meeting to go, and it was snowing out. It started to snow, and they were going to go to the restaurant. And does this sound familiar? Well, that was the episode of Seinfeld.
I was going to say, it sounds like an episode.
It was. That's the episode where he ruined the jacket. He didn't want to turn it inside out because it had a red satin lining, and Richard Yates, or the great author, Elaine's father, kept berating him. And so, so a lot of things happen. Well, that's the basis of my tour, Kramer's reality tour.
Yeah, we're going to talk about your tour in a minute, but first I want to talk about what this show has meant to you and to your life. Your background is what? Stand-up comic?
I did that for about 10, 12 years, I did stand-up comedy. I had the presence of mind to get out just before the comedy boom. I got out in '81. By '85, any idiot with an hour of material could make $5,000 a week. But I was making money in the jewelry business. I got into this fluky electronic jewelry thing that I really scored at. So I got out of stand-up comedy at that point. But I've always been entrepreneurial. Everything I've ever done is always. I've never had a job per se, or I think I had one maybe once. But I've never reported to anybody or had to be any place. Whatever.
You sound like a guy who I've seen frequently. His name is Michael Richards.
Oh, well, actually, Michael is nothing like the real Kramer. Michael Richards, the guy, is a very introspective, very quiet, very insecure, believe it or not. Michael, when he does those scenes, he is so insecure. He's never watched himself on Seinfeld.
Really?
He won't watch the show because he feels...
We've got an illustration here somewhere that I want to show of you with Michael Richards, and I think it's very interesting because he doesn't look like you, but you looked like that at one time, didn't you?
Yes, that's true. That's true. If you look at that illustration of me, it's not an illustration. Well, it's sort of an illustration. It's a photo that I touched up.
What do you mean by touched up?
Well, as I look today, I created this to be the real Kramer. About a year ago, last May, I decided enough already. I'm going to cash in on this Kramer.
What did you look
thing.
like before that?
Well, I didn't have a mustache, no facial hair, and my hair was straight back in a ponytail and or short, but then I grew a little bit of a ponytail, but nothing like long hair like this look. So when I decided the concept of having the real Kramer be this character that I'm going to become this media slut and...
Wait a minute. The character Kramer on the Seinfeld show is based on you.
It's based on me.
And now you're based upon...
I'm based upon myself, exactly. This is life imitating art, imitating life, imitating art. That's what we have here. And so
what did you do?
So what I did was I came up with this idea of I would wear this hat backwards, my hat backwards, and I put my hair out like this, and I'd grow a mustache, and I'd have a branded identity. This is easy to caricature. People will know who this is, and I don't want anyone to think it's Michael Richards. The real Kramer is not Cosmo Kramer, the character that Castle Rock and NBC has proprietary rights to. The character Kramer is the real deal, the guy I own the rights to. And so...
so you're capitalizing it on these tours, really.
Well, the reality tour is the basis of what I'm doing, my fun-filled romp through what's factual and fantasy in the world of Seinfeld that we do. It's a 3.5-hour tour. I do it on Saturdays and Sundays from the Pulse Theater in New York City. But we've also turned it into a stage show called The World of Seinfeld According to Kramer, because, people don't realize how much is behind the show, that it's even a fluke that it got on the air. And so for Seinfeld fans, if they're visiting New York City, this is the greatest 3 hours they'll have.
Well, what does it include?
Well, we start at the Pulse Theater, where the first hour takes place, where we have an exposition. My partner, Bobby Allen Brooks, who is a comedy veteran and the co-host of the tour, he and I explain how Seinfeld came to be, and we show this rare video footage of Larry David, the real George Costanza, doing stand-up in the early 80s. He does a routine that became the episode called The Contest. Do you remember that? That's the episode where the four of them make a bet that they could refrain from treating their bodies as amusement parks.
Oh, yeah.
Remember this episode?
Yeah.
Right. Well, that was started as a stand-up routine. So we show this footage, and then everybody gets a chance to taste some chocolate babka and some black and white cookies, and then we get on the bus and we go to these sites made famous on Seinfeld, and such famous places as, of course, the Soup Kitchen with that very strict chef actually works, and that place really exists.
Now, it's very interesting, just to talk about that for a moment. They called him the Soup Nazi, and they made him famous.
Yeah, I don't use the N-word.
And they made him famous. I noticed that you didn't use it.
Right.
And I'm sure he resents it, but it also has made him tremendously successful.
No, that's not true. He had a successful business before Seinfeld discovered him. There was always a line around his place. It was. And then he says, I don't want publicity. More people come, the quality of the soup goes down. This guy is a soup savant, He can do one thing. He makes great soup. I mean, an 8-ounce cup of seafood bisque is $9, okay? And you have to stand on line an hour and a half to get it.
On 55th Street.
On 55th, just west of 8th Avenue, just east of 8th Avenue.
You had a little altercation with him recently,
Yes, we did. Al, the soup guy, and I did have a little problem. What happened was, ever since I started the reality tour, we're always sold out, in advance. You got to book several weeks in advance. And we're always sold out. And I always prided myself on that. We sell out the tour all the time based on two things: publicity and word of mouth. We've never spent anything for advertising. So I decided to take my first advertising plunge, and next to his soup shop, where there's this line that takes an hour and a half to get through, is this big blank wall. And I rented the wall from the landlord, and I had a big sign advertising Kramer's reality tour, and there's a fun-filled romp for Seinfeld fans. And next to it, as a humanitarian gesture, as a public service, I had a sign made that gave instructions on how to order soup. Because it's true. You got to come on the right, give your money, move to the left, don't ask questions. And I had this really funny sign up there. So now, 2 weeks ago Thursday, or I don't know when we're going to air this, but a couple of weeks ago, the episode, the soup episode, was going to air in syndication for the first time. So we created a media event using that as the hook, the debut of the soup episode, and also we're announcing that I'm joining the cast of Tony and Tina's wedding. And
when is that?
That's December 18th through February 2nd. I'll be going to the wedding 5 nights a week. No matinees, just 5 nights a week. It'll be a fun time. So anyway, I had Tony and Tina there, and I came up there with drop cloths to cover the thing because we had a meteor alert sent out. It was in the AP Day book. The press was coming. And I get there an hour before with drop cloths to cover the sign, and my sign with soup instructions has been painted over in red paint. And now there's drops of red paint at the bottom of the sign, and the drops lead in a path right into his soup shop. So this guy is like the worst vandal in the history of vandalism, okay? So when the press came there, that became a much better story than me announcing I'm at Tony T's wedding. Kramer and the soup Nazi at war. Yeah, I used the name because that's what the headline read in the Associated Press. So what he did in his mind was try to prevent me from getting publicity. What he did was like,
opposite.
Absolutely. So I've been on the radio.
All news is counterpoint on that. Actually, news is different than what's happening. So now let's get back to your tour. So what happens on the tour? I know you get great pictures that you take of people in front of some of the sites.
Right, but everybody gets to find out how episodes happened in real life and how they became episodes in Seinfeld.
So what's real and what's not real on the show?
Well, I mean, this is a 3-hour plus tour. Yeah. I mean, there's lots and lots of real, there's lots and lots of made up, and we separate the two and answer everybody's questions.
What are the locations that are real?
Well, there are 25, 30 locations. We go to the real restaurant that you see on the show every week. We go to the real soup kitchen. We go to the real Chinese place where the takeout guy came to order hair growing tonic for George. We go to
made the telephone call to China.
Exactly, and then we have some surprises that go with that because that happened exactly the way it happened on television. And also, and so there's so many.
You mean with Larry David?
Larry David was across the
video
hall.
Of it.
Yeah, I took a video of Larry's bald head just the way it happened on Seinfeld, and it's exactly how it happened. Larry was trying to get through. He found this thing on CNN that they were growing hair in China, and he's talking on the phone. And you know how it's funny when people don't speak your language, you think they'll understand if you talk louder, right? And he's, does anyone speak English? Just then the guy from Camway Kitchen, we had ordered Chinese food. The door, Larry, the food's here. Larry, hey, does that guy speak Chinese? Come here, put him on the phone.
That really happened.
I swear to you, exactly. And it's so funny because when that show aired for the first time, I was in the jacuzzi. I spent a lot of time as the character does in the hot tub, and it was on a Friday morning, and people were talking. I always overhear people having Seinfeld conversations, and these people would say, "Did you see Seinfeld last night? Was that hilarious with the Chinese delivery boy? How those writers think up this stuff?" I'm sitting there like a fly on the wall, saying, "Yeah, it's pretty amazing."
Let's talk about the tour some more. So it's 3 hours, and
it's 3 hours.
Starts from this theater on 42nd Street.
The Pulse Theater on 42nd Street, and you have to book it in advance, and tickets are $37.50, and the price includes original Kramer's famous pizza with a beverage and dessert. Because I've made pizza for my friends for years. The character on television was depicted as a buffoon trying to launch a do-it-yourself pizza business, but I've been famous for making pizza, and we serve pizza. We go to the Cafe St. Francis where the tour winds up, and everybody gets pizza, beverage, and a surprise dessert, and all this for only $37.50.
We ought to, at this point, as long as we're being so blatant in telling people, we ought to give the telephone number.
Kramer's Reality Tour. I have a special number for people who want to book tickets with a credit card. It's 1-800-KRAMERS, K-R-A-M-E-R-S, 1-800-KRAMERS. That's how you get tickets for the reality tour. And I just was going to say to you
But you do have another telephone number.
For people in the New York area, there's a 212-268-5525. But if you're in this particular area, 1-800-KRAMERS will get you through. And if you can't remember that, call information. We're listed. But, I was just going to say that most off-Broadway shows are about $45 to go see them. They last lasts less than 2 hours, and you leave and you go out to eat. So with my tour, it's 3 hours plus, depending on traffic, and it comes with a great snack at the end.
Well, I've heard of dinner theater. This is pizza theater.
Okay.
You're involved in other enterprises. You obviously are taking advantage of your fame or notoriety, whatever you want to call it. Celebrity.
I'm a bona fide celebrity at this point. It's pretty, the amazing thing, only in America, I started out 25 years ago as a comedian to become famous. Now I'm actually famous. Everywhere I go, people recognize me, not by virtue of any talent, but by virtue of the fact I lived across the hall from a guy who was very talented. So only in America could this happen, and a guy could cash in by living across the hall from somebody talented.
What else are you doing to cash in?
Well, we have the stage show, as I said, which I'm going to be doing for the Learning Annex in New York City. That's for people who can't come on the tour on the weekends. And, a lot of New Yorkers feel that, I don't need to ride around in a bus and look at things in New York, So anyway, I'm doing the stage show, the World of Seinfeld, according for Kramer, at the Learning Annex in New York. Also, there's a CD-ROM in the works, which is an ancillary project of the tour, and a television special. And we're going to Australia. We'll just spend the month of March touring in Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, Adelaide. I don't know, there's 6 or 7 cities we're going to.
And you've got a website?
And the website, any search engine, asks for Kenny Kramer, and the Real Kramer's homepage pops up, and Tony and Tina's wedding, and there's a book, there's also the merchandise, and it's just a world of enterprise. Who would have thought?
Who would have thought, Kramer? Who would have thought? Now, I've seen pictures of you before the mustache, before the hair, before the
This
character.
Is true. Before I created my branded identity.
You were still the same offbeat type of character.
I've always lived my life based upon having a good time and trying to make a living or earn money as a byproduct of having fun.
You said you used the word reality tour. What does reality mean to you?
Well, reality to me, I guess, is different than most people's reality. But reality to me is basically, have a good time and, eat well and stay healthy, exercise, brush your teeth, and don't forget to floss, and everything will work out.
Is it true that you and Larry kept going into each other's, or mostly he keeps coming into Seinfeld's, right?
This is true. Like one of the things that, we talk about on the reality tour is in the show, it's Kramer always coming into Jerry's to borrow things. In reality, it was George coming into Kramer's because I keep a house full of food. I'm always entertaining. Larry never ever bought food to take home. Everything was ordered in or takeout. He never prepared his own food. And so he would come to my house like 20 times a day looking for food. And he's a funny guy. I call him a supermensch. He spent his whole life over tipping in restaurants because he's afraid he looks too Jewish and he doesn't want to create a stereotype for his people. So he spends his whole life over tipping. So in my house, every time he would come in to get something to eat, no matter what it was, he would keep a list and he would write down, no matter how minuscule, Kramer, Oreo cookies here. I'm getting 3 Oreos. Let's see, a package of 50, $3.90. He'd do the math, like 18 cents each times 3, a glass of milk, a quarter. And he'd say, Larry, I don't want your money. I don't need it. Oh, I got to do it this way because I wouldn't feel good. I couldn't come in here and eat your food if I didn't think I could pay, So he would have this list on my refrigerator, and when it would be $10, $20, he'd tear it up, give me the cash. So, when the show first went on the air 8 years ago, he said to me, think of some things that happened that would make funny bits for Seinfeld. And one of the things I suggested was that list, and his mind is evolved because I never said a word about it. 8 years later, last season, sure enough, there was a list. Kramer came in. Jerry, how much is a half a can of Coke? There's no half a can of Coke. You open it, you own it, right?
Now, is he a funny man?
LD? Oh, he's beyond funny.
He writes funny. Yeah. But is he funny? Is he a stand-up comic? He did
his act when he did his act, it was like stand-up Russian roulette. You never knew what was going to happen on any particular night, and he was one of the guys that like all the comics admired. That's why Jerry Seinfeld went to Larry when he had this opportunity to create a show. There were very few guys that could empty the bar out. Every comic could go into the showroom when he went on. Like Larry David, Robin Williams, Gilbert Gottfried. There were just a handful of guys that had that effect on all the comics, And, Larry and Jerry were not friends. They barely spoke to each other. They existed in the same comedy world, but Jerry was this very successful, before America really knew who he was making $500,000 a year in the comedy boom. Larry was still working for $5 a show at the Improv, But Jerry, to his everlasting credit, made an enormous call when NBC came to him, because if there was anything to be said about Jerry's act, that was criticism. It was too safe. You know, it was safe. It was cute. There was no edge there. And when Jerry had this opportunity, he went to Larry David, who was Mr. Edge personified.
But it's interesting. But Jerry is almost a straight man on the show, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, Jerry's great thing is he can make anything a joke. You know, Larry David is the guy who comes up with the stories, who came up with the concept, who came up with depicting people in their worst light. You know, of making the show dark.
Jack Benny also played the foil a lot in a lot of situations.
Yeah,
and some of that.
Yeah, there's some of that too. And you know, but what Larry did was he created a whole new type of television sitcom.
Yes.
I mean, everything's measured now in light of Seinfeld.
Yes.
You look at Friends. What's Friends?
Yes,
It's Seinfeld
pioneering.
with 2 more characters. It's the same formula. You got interlocking stories. You're running 4 consecutive storylines. 2 of them come together. There's linkage between them. There's a payoff in the end.
Yeah.
He created this.
I wanted to ask you about Larry David and Michael Richard. Where did their paths cross? How did he get cast for the show? And then how did all of these mannerisms, which he's put into Kramer, which don't exist in you, how did it happen? How did they get together?
Well, Larry and Michael had known each other from a show called Fridays that they worked on together at
TV
ABC.
show.
Yeah, it was on Friday nights. It was like a Saturday Night Live ripoff that ran on ABC for 2 seasons, and they were both members of that ensemble. But Michael won the job in an audition. He came in and did an audition standing on his head. I swear to you, he went in, he got onto a headstand, and he did an audition, because he always did crazy physical comedy.
Physical things.
And they said, okay, he's the guy, you know. They went with him. Now, I walk in, as we met, you saw, I walked into this place like a normal human being, you know. Michael and I didn't...
Could we debate that? No.
Okay. But Michael and I didn't meet till like sometime after the 3rd season. He didn't want to see pictures of me. He didn't want to know anything about me. So everything you see physically in that character, Michael brought to it, you know. And to their credit, they hired Michael because, you know, when I was lobbying to get the part, I was begging, but you know, I wouldn't have thought to do physical comedy. You know, well, my comedy, I was just sort of a social satirist, you know, but I wouldn't have thought to walk into a door like a crazy man. And that's the ingredient that really put the show over the top, because if you think about it, it's a really smart show. You got to know something to get all the references,
Yes.
but you don't have to know
all
anything.
humor is based upon references.
Yeah, but the references on Seinfeld are very esoteric. You know,
Yes.
John Cheever letters.
Right.
You know, but when Kramer comes on, it becomes accessible to anybody. You don't have to know. You don't have to be a rocket scientist when you see him moonwalk from a platform onto a nightclub table and then go down, or when you saw, you know, him have a seizure, or the way he does things. You know, it's just funny. It makes you laugh, and you don't stop to think, oh, wait a second, what happened in World War II that made that funny? You know,
He's outstanding in what he does, and he's made Kramer. Not the real Kramer, but the Seinfeld
character,
Kramer.
Cosmo Kramer,
has
absolutely.
strong character.
Well,
They're all strong
It's
on
a
the
number
show.
1 show on television, but like at the NBC store, the Kramer poster outsells the other 3 posters like 8 or 9 to 1. You know, it's far and away the Q rating on the characters is Kramer's the top guy on the show.
Where's your poster?
Well, it's there. Go up to my website on the internet. It's there, and there actually will be a poster soon. Now that you mentioned that.
Where's this all going to lead for you? Now, the show may or may not continue.
This is true.
We don't know.
The show will continue as a part of the American culture forever.
And in
for
reruns.
the next couple of generations.
It's international, isn't it?
40, 50 countries at this point. And many countries have it. In Australia, where the show is unbelievably popular. If you think it's popular in America, where it's the number 1 show, in Australia, it's network prime time 5 nights a week. 2 of those nights they show new episodes because they're running 2 seasons behind us. So it's huge, and wherever the show is popular, I've been getting a lot of personal publicity because everybody's excited. There's a real Kramer. Oh my gosh, let's find out about this.
How do you intend into the future to capitalize on this?
Well, in several ways. Of course, there's it's all leading to Kramer, the motion picture. But
you believe that's going to happen?
Oh, why? Of course it will. I mean, I've led this life. That's going to be a hell of a movie, you know. But in the meantime, I'm moving into the entertainment, the leisure time activities businesses with tourism. With my reality tour is what I'm doing in New York now. But I found that I love interacting with tourists, and I'm now a member of the New York City Visitors and Convention Bureau, and we'll be starting other tours.
Licensed tour guide.
I am licensed by the City of New York. I'm a licensed sightseeing tour guide in New York City, and so that's an area that we'll be expanding out in, and also expanding out in other entertainment leisure time activities. You know, a leisure time industry. How did it take me so long to find this?
Do you ever step back and look at yourself and say, what's happened to me?
No, I'm still the same guy. I'm just having a lot of fun now. You know, this celebrity thing is terrific. I mean, it comes with a lot of perks. I haven't seen a downside on it yet. You know, when I see these idiots like want to punch out a photographer for taking their picture, and what are they thinking about? Come on, you want to take my picture? Be my guest, you know?
But you're a celebrity. You're a quasi-celebrity. You're a celebrity because of a character that was created based upon you,
well, yeah.
and who isn't you. It's very interesting that you've been able to do this.
I beg to differ with you, but now it's turning around. You know, I am surpassing that whole image. Like there's a real Kramer now. People go, when they see me on the streets, they go, Kenny. It's Kenny Kramer. You know, big difference. And so I've gone from like a D celebrity to like a C+ celebrity, I guess now as I move forward.
Is that a phenomenon, or have you done that? Have you created that?
Well, I've created it by virtue of all this work I do, all this publicity. You know, I'm here with you. I'm on my way to Philadelphia to do a radio show in the morning, and then Oprah is airing next week in Rolanda. And so when people see you so many times, like the Associated Press has done stories, so that's what happens and how the celebrity thing happens. And I watched it happen virtually overnight. I mean, I wasn't as media savvy as I am today. Mm-hmm. I didn't know when the New York Times put me on the front page of Metro above the fold. You know, I'd never heard that term before, above the fold. You know, somebody called me and said, hey, Kenny, your picture's in the New York Times above the fold. I said, well, what do you mean above the fold? Well, it turns out that's a big deal, you know. The only thing bigger than being above the fold in the Metro, B1 it's called, is to be above the fold A1. But I would have to kill somebody or blow up a federal building to go be elected president to do that. But it turns out that set off this whole wave that's happened internationally. You know, that story got picked up all over the world. And so, you know, I've watched it perpetuate, and I've watched it snowball, and my 15 minutes of fame is now moving into its first anniversary of a year, and it doesn't look like it's slowing down any, so I'm happy to report.
It's astounding. Serendipity is a wonderful thing because we never know what's around the corner, and it's all happening to you, and then, of course, opportunity knocks, but you got to provide a door, and you're providing the door, and that door is opening and opening and opening.
I like to think I'm shamelessly cashing in.
And what we're doing is closing and closing and closing, because believe it or not, we run out of time.
Oh my goodness! Oh, so quickly it's gone.
Thank you so much for coming here and talking about the real Kramer and the Kramer who plays Kramer, and Jerry and Larry and Elaine and George.
And I appreciate you giving me a venue to say 1-800 Kramers. Thanks a lot.
And thanks very much for coming. My guest today is Kenny Kramer, the real Kramer, the Kramer on whom the Seinfeld character played by Michael Richards is based. Great show, great guy. I'm Norman Liss. The name of this program is The Way to Go. Until next time, enjoy yourself.